I'm kind of just going to talk a little bit about Jordan's story and how everything he went through while I was with him in high school. And on July 21st of this year, I got a phone call on vacation that would end up changing my life forever. I met Jordan when I was in the 3rd grade, and we hung out a decent amount when we were in Lakeview and Kimpton, but we really became close during the freshman year of high school. For a while, it seemed that we couldn't be separated and were attached at the hip. We ended up getting girlfriends that were also friends, which meant more time for me and Jordan and I to be together and ended up making us even closer. Jordan was one of the most kind-hearted people I've ever met in my life. There wasn't a time that Jordan was there and people weren't laughing, and that he could bring a smile to anyone's face and make anyone laugh. His sense of humor could occasionally become obnoxious, but that was the way Jordan was, and that's what made him him. I noticed Jordan using painkillers when we were pretty young, but didn't think much about it. I just mainly thought it was something people just tried when they were younger. Jordan started using painkillers more and more, but I still wasn't thinking much about it because I was so young and not really educated on what could later on happen down the road. As time went on, Jordan continued to use and eventually moved on to using stronger ones. And as the painkillers got more expensive and he could not afford them and they weren't getting it done, he moved on to heroin, which became cheaper and was a much more intense high. At that point in time, I never could have seen it spiraling out of control into the problem that it ended up being. Jordan would lie anytime you would ask him if he was using and would never admit it, and it became very frustrating to try and talk to him. At some points it was very hard for me to be friends with him, but I continued to stick by his side because I knew the Jordan before this drug took over his life. I knew how much he didn't want to live like that. Jordan ended up going to IBH and getting clean there, and I remember going to visit him there and just seeing him so much healthier and not using it. It made me so happy. He was so happy that he had gotten clean, was excited to get home from rehab and be able to hang out and do everything again. I went and visited him as frequently as I could, but I remember the day that I saw him really clean for the first time at IBH, and I just remember thinking to myself how much he really had changed and knew that it was going to get much better for him. Jordan got out of rehab, and we started hanging out again, and it was great. It was back to the Jordan that I became close friends with my freshman year of high school. We were back to being inseparable. Jordan had gotten a job, was living on his own, and everything was really looking up for him, and he was extremely happy with his life. Jordan was clean for about 20 months before he started falling back into doing heroin again, and I knew that this time it was going to get bad, and he was going to struggle much more. He was on and off using for a couple months, and then he started getting clean again, which I ended up helping him to get a job at the pizza shop that I was working at, and I really thought things were going to start looking up for him. He was really happy to be working with me, spending time with me, and so was I. I left for vacation about a week after he had started working with me, and on July 21st, I got the call that I had dreaded getting for so long. When I got the call, I collapsed to my knees on the porch of the hotel, and I just didn't have strength to stand. I always knew this could end up happening, but I never thought it would happen to him. It seemed that the world had just came to a standstill, and I felt numb. My emotions were just frozen, and I didn't know what to think, and I still really don't know what to think. I hate hearing people just say, well, it's their fault, or it's just a drug addict. Well, that quote-unquote drug addict was my best friend, and he was also someone's son, grandson, brother, and boyfriend. People that say that just have not experienced it and it just hasn't hit close to home enough for them. Jordan didn't choose to live like that. He may have chose to use the drug the first time, but he did not like living the way that he had to. It is a constant battle every day to stay sober and keep a good mindset about it. People don't act like this is human lives that we are talking about. These are real people who have lives of their own and families of their own. I think one thing we need to focus more on to help with this epidemic is educating younger kids on heroin. We focus too much on other things and are not educating kids on this drug that will take over your life and will control it if you use it. I would like our drug education programs to focus more on the severity of heroin. It is hitting home and should be alarming to everyone how many young people we have lost just in this community alone. Kids should be educated from a very young age about this drug so this problem does not continue on to further generations of young people. I'm tired of hearing news of someone I went to school with or graduated with passing away from this sickening drug. If this event today or any of these speeches change someone else's mindset on heroin, then at least one life that has been saved. Thank you.
My name is Morgan Kreptowski. I'm 21 years old and have grown up in Stow. I recently lost my boyfriend, Jordan Knox, to this evil drug last month on July 21st. As I'm here today, I wonder what in the world happened. We have seen so many people die from this drug. I never thought he would have been the next person I would see go. Jordan and I have been dating for 5 years, so please bear with me as I tell a story. When I first started dating Jordan, it was in high school. I never actually thought that Jordan had a real problem. To me, I just loved the way he was. I looked right past his addiction. Jordan was super smart, funny, and had an awesome personality. In high school, I didn't know much about addiction, but Jordan knew he had a problem. Jordan started drinking. He then started smoking cigarettes, weed, and tried some other drugs. Jordan's drug of choice were downers. He loved that something so small could relax him and make him forget about everything else in the world. Thinking of all of our scenarios that we went through today, I wish I would have told more people about his addiction. After Jordan and I graduated high school, he found a new love of his life. Her name was heroin. When Jordan first started using heroin, he became a whole different person. Jordan and I started to slowly drift apart, and we would always be constantly fighting. Heroin was the only thing he cared about, his high to get it again. He was getting into so much trouble, and he didn't even care. This is when I realized that he had a serious problem. Jordan was so in love with me, but the love for this new drug was so much greater. Jordan was getting into so much trouble that he had warrants out for his arrest. He finally turned himself in one day and got sent to Summit County Jail. Jordan's sentence was he had to stay in jail until a bed opened up at IBH. IBH is the Integral Brotherhood Home, an addiction recovery center. This is what helps him get through life. When we first got here, he had no interest in staying sober. He thought after IBH he would go back out and start using. But when he actually entered, he was really confused. All of the people who work at IBH are recovering addicts themselves. All of these addicts were so happy and full of life. It gave Jordan hope again. Jordan then stayed sober for over a year and a half. This was the best year ever for Jordan and I, and his family, and our friends. We had such a good, stable relationship. Everything was perfect again. He had a good job that he held for a long time for once in his life. We went on vacations together. He attended his meetings. He volunteered places. He even went back to school. He got off his probation, and he could drive again. I would have never thought in a million years of him using again. Jordan then stayed sober until he got a serving job. Jordan was in love with all the money he would get. He never had this much money just in his hands. He started to buy things all the time that were worthless and that we didn't really need. Then he started venturing himself away from me. He started hanging around with this group of people that always went out and were drinking. Jordan was so curious about having a drink. He said that he's been sober long enough and that he thought he could have one drink. He often talked to me about having one drink, and I always told him that he didn't need to. But I should have known. He kept bringing this conversation up over and over again because he was already going out and drinking behind my back. At this time, we were always talking about getting an apartment together, and he was really pushing it. We started staying at Jordan's parents' house for a bit, and this is when his problems started to get worse. I would wake up in the morning smelling alcohol in his breath. I confronted him, and he told me the truth, and he told me that if you want me to drink, then I will stop. But it just isn't that easy. A few weeks later, we got an apartment together, and everything was going good for the first few months that we lived there. And then all of a sudden, I knew that he was shooting up heroin again. I was so shocked and didn't know what to do. Jordan had this swollen mark on him, and he told me that he punched something at work. Where the mark was, there was no way he could get it from punching anything. But I knew exactly what the mark was because I've seen it before. So much has happened over the past few months with his addiction. I wish he never got this serving job because maybe this wouldn't have happened. There were nights and days that I would search our house from top to bottom to make sure there wasn't anything in our house. I would wake up every hour in the middle of the night just to make sure he was okay. I constantly went through his things and looked in every single hiding spot he's had. It was to the point I was really scared about living with him, and I felt like a psycho for constantly going through all of our stuff. This happened out of the blue. I wasn't prepared for it at all. I love Jordan with my whole heart. He's my best friend. I did everything you could possibly think of just to keep him alive one day. Jordan overdosed many times at our house, but luckily I was there each time to save him. The policemen that were at our house told me I was Jordan's guardian angel and that he had a demon on his back. Being told I was his guardian angel made me feel so good and have hope that he would overcome this addiction again. Jordan wanted to be sober. He went through detox multiple times and even got assessed to go back to IBH. For a little bit, it was going really good. We were going to the gym. I would take him to meetings and anywhere he wanted to go. Jordan knew that he needed to do himself, but he lost everything that he's worked so hard for. He became back on Stow and Akron probation. He had to do random drug tests 3 days a week. He had to go to probation appointments in Stow and Akron, keep a stable job, go to 4 meetings a week, meet with a recovery coach the other day, 3 days, and had to go IBH meetings that helps you stay on the list. All of these things were things to help him, but it's a little too much if you think of it. Jordan didn't have a license, so I didn't understand how he was supposed to commute to all these places. I personally think he would have been better with just getting a jail sentence like he did the first time. I told Jordan whatever happened this time, that I would be here for it all. Our relationship has grown and matured so much over the years that everything right now sucks without him. I wish he could be here right now telling his story himself. This is something that he always wanted to do. Every day was a life battle, and he fought until the drug finally won. Thank you.